The bell above the cafe door chimed softly, almost apologetically, as the man stepped inside. He wore exhaustion the way others wore cologne, subtle, expensive, and impossible to ignore. His suit was perfectly tailored, his watch understated but unmistakably rare, yet his eyes looked like they hadn't slept properly in years. He ordered nothing more than a black coffee and chose the small table by the window, the one most people avoided because of the draft and the constant reminder of the outside world rushing by. He liked it there. It felt honest. Unforgiving. Like life. The young woman behind the counter noticed him immediately. Not because he was wealthy, she had learned long ago how misleading appearances could be, but because of the way his shoulders sagged as he sat down, as if the weight he carried had nothing to do with money at all. She brought his coffee herself, setting it down gently, her fingers lingering for half a second longer than necessary on the saucer. "You look tired," she said quietly, not rehearsed, not flirtatious. Just true. Then, almost as if surprised by her own words, she added, "Like my husband did, before he left." The man looked up. For a moment, the world outside the window blurred. Traffic, pedestrians, noise, none of it mattered. Her voice had cut through him with surgical precision. People usually spoke to him carefully, with calculation. This woman hadn't calculated anything. "I'm sorry," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure why. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "If you don't mind." She hesitated. The cafe was quiet, mid-morning lull, and her shift manager was busy in the back. She nodded and Saturday. "My name's Daniel," he offered. "Lena," she replied. "I shouldn't have said that. It just slipped." "No," he said softly. "It was accurate." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Up close, Daniel could see it now, the tired grace of someone who had learned to survive loss rather than heal from it. "He died 2 years ago," she said, surprising herself with how easily the words came out. "Cancer. Fast. Brutal. He used to sit just like you, right there, pretending the world wasn't eating him alive." Daniel wrapped his hands around the warm mug, though he barely felt the heat. "I didn't lose anyone," he said. "Not like that." "But you lost something," she replied. "Not a question. A statement." He exhaled slowly. "Everything that mattered." She studied him then, properly this time. The lines around his eyes weren't from age, they were from decisions. From responsibility. From nights spent choosing between bad and worse. "You don't look lonely," she said. "You look surrounded and still alone." That almost broke him. Daniel was a man who ran a global empire, who negotiated billion-pound deals without blinking, who controlled rooms with silence alone. Yet here, in a modest cafe with chipped mugs and mismatched chairs, a young widow saw straight through him. "My assistants talk," he said. "My board argues. My phone never stops. But no one asks how I'm holding up." Lena nodded. "They think strength means silence." "And silence," Daniel said, "is killing me." A pause settled between them, not awkward, shared. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the window with thin silver lines. "My husband used to say," Lena murmured, "that people don't need saving. They need to be seen." Daniel looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his chest, something tight, something long ignored. "Do you still believe that?" he asked. She looked down at her hands. "Most days." Another customer entered, breaking the moment. Lena stood, smoothing her apron. "I should get back." "Wait," Daniel said, too quickly. He stopped himself, softer now. "Thank you for seeing me." She smiled, genuine this time. "You're welcome, Daniel." She walked back to the counter, but the space she left behind felt heavier than before. Daniel watched her move, unhurried, thoughtful, and wondered when the last time was that a conversation had stayed with him like this. He finished his coffee slowly. When he stood to leave, Lena glanced up. Their eyes met again, and in that brief exchange was an unspoken understanding, 2 lives bent by loss, intersecting for reasons neither could yet explain. Daniel reached into his pocket, hesitated, then left something on the table beside the empty cup. Lena noticed it only after he'd gone. Her breath caught as she picked it up, because it wasn't money. At least not just that. It was a business card, simple, elegant, bearing a name she vaguely recognized from headlines and late-night news. CEO. Founder. Billionaire. Her heart raced, not with excitement, but with confusion.
Daniel, she whispered.
Outside, across the street, Daniel paused under the awning, rain soaking the city around him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the urge to run back to work. He felt the urge to go back inside. And just as he turned, unaware of the storm his presence was about to bring into Lena's carefully rebuilt world, the cafe door opened again. This time with someone who clearly knew exactly who he was, and who had not come by coincidence. The man who stepped inside next moved with confidence sharpened by entitlement. His coat was expensive, his posture rigid, his eyes already scanning the room until they landed on Daniel's back. Recognition flickered instantly, followed by irritation. "Daniel Hale," the man said, loud enough to cut through the soft cafe noise. "Of all the places." Daniel closed his eyes for half a second before turning around. "Mark," he replied evenly. "I thought you were in Zurich." "Was," Mark said, approaching. "Board meeting got moved. Funny thing is, I've been trying to reach you for hours." Daniel glanced briefly at his phone. 12 missed calls. He slipped it back into his pocket. "I needed air." Mark scoffed. "You needed air, so you disappeared before signing off on a £300 million acquisition." Lena watched from behind the counter, unease tightening her chest. The stranger's tone was sharp, demanding. Daniel, however, didn't flinch. "I'll sign it," Daniel said. "After lunch." Mark stared at him as if he'd misheard. "After, Daniel, this isn't some corner shop deal." Daniel's gaze drifted, almost unconsciously, back to the counter. To Lena. Mark followed the look, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh," Mark said slowly. "I see." "There's nothing to see," Daniel replied. Mark smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Right. Because you don't do nothing. You do strategy. And whatever this is," his eyes flicked again toward Lena. "It's new." Lena felt suddenly exposed, as if she'd been dragged into a world she hadn't agreed to enter. She busied herself with wiping the counter, though it was already clean. "Not here," Daniel said quietly. "Not now." Mark leaned closer. "You don't get to choose not now when thousands of people's jobs hang on your decisions." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And you don't get to follow me into my silence and tear it apart." For a moment, neither man spoke. Rain battered harder against the windows, the cafe growing warmer, more claustrophobic. Mark straightened. "You've changed," he said. "Since the merger." "Since everything." Daniel met his eyes. "No. I finally stopped pretending I hadn't." Mark exhaled sharply, glancing at his watch. "Call me. Soon." He turned to leave, then paused, looking once more toward Lena. "Be careful," he said, not to her, but about her. The door shut behind him. Lena's hands were shaking now. She hated that she'd noticed. Hated even more that she cared. Daniel stood there a moment longer, shoulders tense, then walked back inside fully. He didn't sit. He approached the counter instead. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said. Lena shrugged lightly. "I've seen worse arguments over burnt toast." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Still, I didn't mean to pull you into my chaos." "You didn't," she said. "It just wandered in on its own." They shared a quiet breath. "You should go," she added gently. "Whatever's waiting for you out there, it sounds important." Daniel nodded, but didn't move. "Do you ever get tired of being sensible?" Lena looked up at him, surprised. "Every day." "Then why do it?" "Because if I don't," she said softly, "everything falls apart." Daniel absorbed that. "That's exactly why I do it too." A silence followed, deeper now, layered with things unsaid. "You said your husband used to sit by the window," Daniel said. "What did he do?" "He was a teacher," Lena replied. "History. He believed stories mattered. That people repeat their mistakes when they forget them." Daniel considered that. "I've spent my life building something that looks impressive from the outside. But I don't know what story it tells." Lena hesitated, then said, "Maybe you're still writing it." Her words stayed with him, settling somewhere heavy and warm in his chest. Her manager called her name from the back. Lena glanced over her shoulder, then back at Daniel. "I have to go." "Of course," he said. He took a step back, giving her space, but his eyes lingered, curious, searching, restrained. As she turned away, Daniel felt something unfamiliar, reluctance.
Not the strategic kind. The human kind.
He reached into his jacket again, pulled out his phone, and typed quickly before he could overthink it. When Lena returned to the counter, he slid the phone toward her, screen down. "In case," he said simply. She looked at the phone, then at him. "In case of what?" "In case you ever feel like talking to someone who won't pretend to have answers." Lena didn't touch the phone immediately.
"And what if I don't?" Daniel smiled, real this time.
"Then nothing changes." She picked it up, hesitated, then entered her number with deliberate slowness.
She slid it back.
"Then maybe," she said, "something does." Daniel felt his chest tighten again, but this time it didn't hurt. He stepped back, nodded once, and headed for the door. Just before leaving, he paused and turned. "Lena?" "Yes."
"You were right earlier," he said.
"About people needing to be seen." She watched him go, rain swallowing his silhouette as he disappeared into the gray street. Outside, Daniel stood beneath the awning again, phone buzzing relentlessly in his pocket. For the first time, he didn't answer it immediately.
He looked back through the cafe window.
Lena was there, framed by warm light, wiping the same clean counter, lost in thought. Neither of them noticed the black car parked across the street, engine running, nor the woman inside watching the cafe with focused interest, someone whose life was already entwined with Daniel's in ways Lena could never imagine, and whose arrival would test just how fragile this unexpected connection truly was. The woman in the black car lowered her sunglasses just enough to study the cafe again. Her name was Evelyn Cross, and she did not believe in coincidences. Years in corporate warfare had trained her to recognize patterns long before others sensed danger. Daniel Hale didn't vanish from boardrooms without a reason, and he certainly didn't stop in forgotten cafes unless something had shifted. She watched him through the rain as he finally stepped away from the awning, phone still silent in his hand.
He didn't look back again. That unsettled her more than if he had.
Inside, Lena tried to focus on the rhythm of work.
Cups. Steam. Orders called out and answered.
Yet her mind kept drifting to the weight of Daniel's voice, the way his eyes had softened when he spoke her name.
She scolded herself quietly.
People like him didn't drift into lives like hers and stay. They passed through, leaving stories behind, stories other people told. Her shift ended an hour later. As she untied her apron, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She stared at the screen longer than she should have. "Daniel, I wasn't sure if I should send this. You said in case."
"This is me testing that word."
Her heart thudded, sharp and uninvited. She typed, erased, typed again.
"Lena, I'm glad you did. I was starting to think the cafe invented you." 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then reappeared.
"Daniel, I can assure you, I'm very real."
Unfortunately.
She smiled despite herself, slipping her coat on as she stepped outside. The rain had eased into a fine mist, the city breathing out. Lena, unfortunately, is usually honest. "Daniel, honesty is becoming a bad habit of mine today." She walked slowly toward the bus stop, fingers cold, chest warm.
"Lena, careful. Habits turn into changes." Several seconds passed before his reply.
"Daniel, that might be the point." Across the street, Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at the cafe, irritation flickering. Daniel's location had been flagged once. That was enough. She started the engine, pulling into traffic with calculated patience. That evening, Daniel sat alone in his penthouse, city lights stretching endlessly beneath glass walls.
The space was immaculate. Cold.
Designed to impress people who never stayed long enough to notice how empty it felt. He poured himself a drink, then didn't touch it. Instead, he stood by the window, replaying Lena's voice. "People don't need saving. They need to be seen." His phone buzzed again, this time a calendar alert. Emergency board call.
He dismissed it without opening the details. Another message arrived.
"Lena, do you ever feel guilty for resting?"
Daniel frowned slightly. "Daniel, constantly." "You?"
"Lena, I used to. Then I realized exhaustion doesn't honor the dead." The words landed heavily. He imagined her saying them, calm, steady, carrying grief without letting it consume her.
"Daniel, I don't know how to stop running."
"Lena, maybe you don't stop. Maybe you just choose a better direction."
He read that twice.
Somewhere else in the city, Evelyn met with Mark in a private lounge overlooking the river. He looked tense, tie loosened, confidence cracking at the edges. "She's a problem," Mark said, swirling his drink. I don't know who she is yet, but she's already a distraction.
Evelyn's lips curved faintly. Distractions reveal fractures.
Daniel's been fractured for years.
This is different, Mark insisted. He skipped a signing.
That never happens.
Evelyn leaned back.
Everything ends eventually, Mark. Even control.
He scoffed. You sound almost pleased. I'm curious, she corrected.
And curiosity keeps me alive. The next morning, Lena woke earlier than usual. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, catching dust in the air. For a moment, she reached instinctively for the other side of the bed, then stopped herself. Old habits. Quiet grief.
Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Daniel, good morning. I hope that's not intrusive.
She exhaled, steadying herself.
Lena, it's not. I'm awake.
Daniel, I was wondering, would you let me buy you coffee today?
Somewhere that doesn't involve an apron. Her thumb hovered.
Lena, I don't usually mix worlds.
Daniel, neither do I. That might be why this feels risky. Risk. The word stirred something sharp and alive in her chest.
Lena, one coffee. Daniel, I'll behave.
Lena, I doubt that.
She sent the address of a small riverside cafe, quieter, less familiar.
Neutral ground.
When Daniel arrived, he wasn't wearing a suit.
Just a dark coat, open collar, no watch. He looked younger somehow. Less guarded.
You look different, Lena said as they sat at a.
So do you, he replied.
Less like someone holding the world together.
She smiled.
I left that version at home. They talked, not about business, not about grief directly, but about small things that somehow carried weight. Favorite books.
Cities that felt too loud.
The strange loneliness of being surrounded by people. At one point, Daniel laughed, really laughed, and startled himself.
I'd forgotten that sound, he admitted. Lena studied him.
You don't have to forget who you are to change.
He met her gaze.
And you don't have to stay where you were hurt. The air between them shifted, fragile and charged. Neither noticed the woman across the river, watching from behind reflective glass, making a quiet call.
Yes, Evelyn said calmly. It's her.
And no, I don't think Daniel realizes what this will cost him yet. She ended the call, eyes never leaving the pair below, leaning closer over untouched coffee, two lives edging toward a collision neither fully understood, as forces far beyond that small table began to move. The river moved slowly beside them, gray and patient, as if it had seen this kind of moment many times before, two people leaning towards something unnamed, pretending it wasn't already shaping them. Lena wrapped her hands around her cup, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. You live like someone who's always preparing for impact, she said gently.
Daniel glanced at the water.
When you grow up learning that one mistake can cost thousands of people their jobs, you stop allowing yourself softness. And when you lose someone, Lena replied, you learn that hardness doesn't protect you either. Their eyes met, and the truth sat between them without accusation. Daniel's phone vibrated on the table.
He didn't look at it. You can answer, Lena said.
I don't want to be the reason you ignore your life.
He smiled faintly.
You're not the reason. You're the pause. The phone buzzed again, insistent this time. He turned it face down. Tell me about your husband, he said quietly.
Not how he died. How he lived.
Lena blinked, caught off guard. Most people avoided the subject or rushed through it like bad weather.
He was infuriatingly hopeful, she said after a moment.
Believed people were better than their worst moments. He used to stop strangers to help them carry groceries. It embarrassed me.
She smiled sadly.
Now I miss it. Daniel listened without interrupting, something he rarely did. Do you still believe what he believed?
I want to, she said honestly.
Some days it feels like betrayal to move forward. Grief isn't loyalty, Daniel said, surprising them both. It's weight. And weight can be set down without forgetting who gave it to you.
Her throat tightened.
You say that like you've practiced it.
I've practiced avoiding it, he replied.
There's a difference. Across the river, Evelyn watched the way Daniel leaned in, not with hunger, but with attention.
That was new. Dangerous.
She lowered her phone after sending a single message. Proceed carefully.
Emotional leverage identified. Mark received it with a curse.
Back at the cafe, time slipped.
The cups emptied. The air cooled. Lena checked the time and startled.
I should go,
she said reluctantly.
Late shift tomorrow.
Daniel nodded, standing as well. Thank you. For today.
They walked together toward the street, steps unhurried.
At the corner, they stopped. This is me, Lena said.
Daniel hesitated, then said, I don't want to rush whatever this is.
She studied him. Neither do I. But don't disappear. I won't, he said. Not unless you ask me to.
She considered that promise, then nodded once. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Lena. As she walked away, Daniel stayed where he was, watching until she turned the corner.
His phone rang immediately after.
Daniel, Mark snapped when he answered.
We need to talk. Now. Tomorrow, Daniel said.
This is not. Tomorrow, Daniel repeated, and hung up. For the first time, it felt less like rebellion and more like choice. That night, Lena lay awake longer than usual. Her phone rested beside her, silent but present. She wasn't imagining futures or promises. She was simply aware that something had shifted inside her, something careful and cautious but alive. The next few days unfolded quietly. Messages exchanged between meetings and shifts. Short, thoughtful, unforced. Daniel found himself listening more in boardrooms, speaking less. People noticed. Some approved. Others didn't. Evelyn noticed everything. She arranged a dinner, intimate, strategic, and invited Daniel under the guise of reconciliation. Old alliances. Old loyalties. You've been distant, she said over wine, eyes sharp but voice smooth. That's unlike you.
I'm reassessing, Daniel replied.
Because of her? Evelyn asked, casually.
He stilled.
You've been following me.
I've been protecting you, she corrected.
Emotional attachments are liabilities in our world. She's not a liability, Daniel said firmly. Evelyn tilted her head. You sound convinced. That's what worries me. Meanwhile, Lena sensed the shift too, not in words, but in pauses. Daniel's replies came later. Shorter. She didn't push.
She knew what pressure felt like.
One evening, as she closed the cafe, a woman stepped inside just before the door locked.
Elegant. Controlled. Eyes that measured. Are you Lena? The woman asked.
Yes, Lena replied cautiously.
I'm Evelyn, she said.
A colleague of Daniel's. Lena's stomach tightened. Is everything okay? Evelyn smiled, polite and distant. I was hoping to understand what he sees in you. That's not really something I can explain, Lena said evenly. Evelyn studied her for a long moment. You seem kind. Kindness is expensive, especially when it costs someone power.
I didn't ask for anything, Lena said.
That's usually how it starts, Evelyn replied.
Just be careful. People like Daniel don't get to choose freely.
Not without consequences. She turned and left, the bell chiming softly behind her. Lena stood still, heart racing, the warmth of recent days cooling into uncertainty.
Her phone buzzed. Daniel, are you okay?
She stared at the message, the echo of Evelyn's words pressing in.
Lena, I don't know. I think your world just knocked on my door. Several seconds passed. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I never wanted that.
Lena, I know. But intentions don't stop collisions. Across the city, Daniel stood alone again in his glass tower, realizing that seeing someone clearly also meant exposing them to the shadows you carried with you, and that the next choice he made would change far more than just his own life.
Daniel didn't sleep that night.
He stood by the window until dawn bled slowly into the city, replaying every word Lena had written, every warning Evelyn had delivered, every excuse he had used for years to justify choosing power over presence. For the first time, the cost of his life wasn't abstract. It had a face, a voice, a woman who wiped counters clean and still carried grief with grace.
By morning, the decision was no longer frightening. It was clear.
He arrived at the headquarters earlier than anyone expected. The boardroom filled quickly, tension thick, whispers sharp. Mark sat rigid, Evelyn calm as ever, eyes assessing Daniel like a final chess move.
Daniel didn't sit. I'm stepping down as CEO, he said. Silence fell so hard it felt physical.
Mark laughed once, disbelieving. This is not funny.
I'm not joking, Daniel continued. Effective immediately. I'll remain a shareholder.
I'll ensure stability, but I won't lead this company anymore. Evelyn's composure cracked, just slightly. You're destroying everything you built. No, Daniel said steadily. I'm saving the part of me I lost while building it.
Voices erupted. Objections. Threats. Forecasts of disaster.
Daniel listened, then raised a hand. I spent my life being indispensable to everyone except myself. That ends today. He walked out before they could argue him back into chains.
The news broke within hours. Headlines screamed. Markets trembled. Analysts speculated. Some called it madness.
Others, bravery. Daniel didn't read any of it.
He went to the café.
Lena was behind the counter when he walked in, and for a brief second, fear crossed her face, fear that he had come carrying apologies instead of answers.
He waited until her shift ended.
Until the door locked and the world narrowed to just the two of them. I chose, he said simply.
She searched his eyes.
What did you choose?
You. Her breath caught.
Daniel. I know what it costs, he said gently. I know the world I come from doesn't forgive men who walk away.
But I also know what it costs to stay. And I won't let you pay for my fear.
Tears welled, uninvited. I never asked you to give up your life.
You didn't, he replied.
You reminded me I had one. They stood there, two people trembling on the edge of something irreversible.
What happens now? She asked.
He smiled, softer than she'd ever seen him. Now I learn how to live without hiding behind importance. If you'll let me. Lena stepped forward, resting her forehead against his chest. I don't need a savior, she whispered. I need a partner. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, careful, reverent. Then let me earn that.
Weeks passed. The storm faded.
A new CEO steadied the company. Daniel retreated from headlines, from black cars and glass towers. He moved into a smaller flat near the river.
He learned how to cook badly. He learned how to wait.
Lena watched him stumble and smile and try. She watched him listen, to students when he volunteered at a local school, to strangers with no agenda, to her when grief returned unexpectedly.
He didn't fix it. He stayed.
One evening, months later, they sat by the same riverside cafe where everything had begun. The water glowed gold beneath the setting sun. I think, Lena said quietly, my husband would have liked you.
Daniel swallowed.
I think he was extraordinary.
She nodded, eyes shining. He taught me that love doesn't end.
It changes shape. Daniel reached for her hand. Then let this be its next shape. Across the river, Evelyn watched from afar, reading a headline that no longer angered her. She closed the tablet, exhaled, and for the first time in years, let go.
Some battles weren't meant to be won.
The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as another customer entered, unnoticed. Life continued, messy, ordinary, real.
Lena leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. You don't look tired anymore, she said.
He smiled, watching the water move. Neither do you. And in the quiet space between what they had lost and what they had chosen, two lives finally rested, seen, held, and unafraid to begin again.